Us. Hello everyone, welcome to Hayashi Dojo in Mannheim, Germany. I'm Ryan Hayashi with another video karate lesson for my students. Although some other people in YouTube have clicked on these videos and contacted me from various JKA groups from around the world. So thank you for watching, glad you enjoy. The topic of this one is the inclusion of karate in the Olympic Games beginning in the year 2020. And some of the historical background and my opinion on what this means for karate. So, I've waited a week to post this just to give it some thought. I got the information last week on August the 4th, 2016, after the General Assembly meeting of the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee. They voted on the inclusion of 5 new sports into the Olympic Games to be held in the year 2020 in Tokyo, Japan. They voted to include all 5, which are baseball, skateboarding, surfing, climbing, and karate. All newly introduced Olympic sports are first presented as a demonstration sport with the option to then continue in the following games 4 years later as a competition sport with the first medal competitions. For example, in the year 1968, judo was introduced as a demonstration sport, the first games held in 1972. In 1988, taekwondo was introduced as a new demonstration sport, the first games held 4 years later in 1992. So karate will be presented in Tokyo, Japan, in the year 2020 with the option to have the first games held 4 years later in the year 2024. So, I've been following this since the early 90s, been waiting for over 20 years to see if this happens. And it's going to raise a lot of various opinions, that it's not good for the development of karate, it's going to change it into a more of a sports-oriented thing. My opinion is actually both, but at the same time fairly central. I feel that before this was announced, before the year 2016, karate already existed in many different forms, from full contact, Kyokushinkai style, to our JKA or WKF light contact style, to what they call freestyle karate, which basically amounts to making up your own breakdance acrobatic routines mixed with capoeira, wushu, and parkour. There's been a huge diversity already anyway. That's not going to change. What is going to change is the amount of exposure karate gets beginning in 4 years. And I'll explain a little bit why. Because my one area of interest for me has always been media and communication science. So how media influences mankind. And people tend to go for what they're fed. They tend to wear, eat, drink, smoke, and buy what they see. A few examples. The tobacco industry boomed within Europe because of the Hollywood movies of the 1930s and 40s. In those days, it was presented as glamorous, American, modern, and cool to smoke. This generated an entire generation of chain smokers across Italy, France, and Germany, and the rest of Europe. In the late 70s, actually, beginning with the first Superman movie starring Christopher Reeve, there was a wave of injuries across North America from little kids jumping off roofs, because if they see Superman flying with better looking special effects that had ever been presented before, and it looked convincing, kids would climb up onto rooftops, jump off, and break their arms and legs. That's the way humans react to what they're presented. Another perfect example, the boys in the gangster hood generation movies of the early to mid 90s, which presented the suburban, socioeconomically challenged, the ghetto movies, where bros from the hood needed to shoot people people and steal and sell drugs in order to survive. That glamorized it so that in the following few years there was an increase in the number of shootings in not only within that type of neighborhood, but also as perpetrated by young black North Americans, because they'd seen it in movies, and the next thing you knew, it became a part of their cool, young, and angry identity. So they shot people. I could go on and on. Speak to marketing experts, they'll tell you in more detail, or psychologists, how if people see it, they'll Google it, they'll look for it, they'll want it, they'll buy it, they'll consume it. Same goes for skateboarding, surfing, and climbing. Those are young, dynamic sports. If they were to add parkour, it would be quite similar. Baseball is a little bit older, more established, and not as popular worldwide, although it does exist in some countries like Canada, the US, and Japan. But when we're looking at surfing, skateboarding, and climbing, this gives a new generation of young, dynamic sports, which will increase the viewership for those hours, for that screen time of the Olympic Games. And that's what the IOC wants, because it's a money-making machine. Just like FIFA, the FIFA, if you're a soccer or football fan. They need to generate revenue. This is exactly why traditional Roman Greek wrestling was actually considered for possible exclusion from the games, just because of the number of people who practice it, the number of people who compete, and unfortunately the number of people who watch it have dropped over the years. So, how will this affect karate? I'm sure it will have a short-term effect, and when I say short-term, I mean 15 to 20 years. Not that karate necessarily needs it, because within the martial arts it already is, and has been for several decades, the market leader, meaning it has the largest number of practitioners from all of the martial arts styles. But television is very powerful. Even in the last few years, from 2014, 15, and 16, people would come ask me, even people who know me, would ask me about my Taekwondo school. Now, why would they say Taekwondo? Because they've seen the dojo advertising posters, or they've seen ads of me wearing a white uniform and a black belt. And because of the media boost and the television presence of Taekwondo over the last 25 years, they equate what they see to Taekwondo. Once they see karate side by side with boxing, judo, and Taekwondo, they'll understand it's a separate sport. Now, this will not necessarily change anything within my team's way of training, because as a classically trained JKA Shotokan Ryu karate practitioner, I will continue to teach karate as a cultural heritage and a classical art form first. There's a big truck rolling by. And that's not going to change. I tend, in my way of teaching here at my own small dojo, I tend to be more on the conservative side of the spectrum, meaning I actually still do choose my students as opposed to the other way around. I don't teach children, meaning I'll speak to candidates 16 years or older, and if they're younger than 16, they have to have the mental development and dedication and ability to concentrate of an adult so that they can train with adults like adults. So that would not change. Historically speaking, I see this as just another development in a long chain of changes that has happened to karate. And I always come back to my position being the same as Sensei Kichin Funakoshi's, which was to embrace the new and respect the old. Because he himself was a bit of a maverick when he adopted these white uniforms, this type of belt Kyu and Dan system from judo, because he wanted to popularize what in the early 1920s was an unknown Okinawan art. He, starting in May the 27th, 1949, a group of his students, after his son Gigo Yoshitaka Funakoshi passed away. This is now for the historians. Obata Isao, Hidetaka Nishiyama, and Masatoshi Nakayama founded then the first, oldest, original, and government-recognized organization for karate, the Nihon Karate Kyokai, or Japan Karate Association, still existing today. In 1939, he had built for him from his group of students the first ever karate dojo. So what they wore, the way they trained, the language they were training in, Japanese, the concept of a dojo, the concept of adopting dojo culture from Japanese Budo, all of this was new, and not all of his colleagues agreed with him. There are examples, for example, Sensei Motobu of Motobu-ryu, who was more Okinawan, could not speak Japanese, and disagreed with some of the things Sensei Gichin Funakoshi did. But history is written by the victors. Then, after he passed away in 1957, Masatoshi Nakayama, the first chief instructor of the JKA, with Funakoshi being the first honorary chairman, held the first ever competition in karate, something that Sensei Funakoshi actually said he was against. So the examples go on and on of the art developing, and I see this as just one small event in a large chain of events that has brought karate here into what it is today. Okay, so thank you for watching.